But after almost 2 years of war, what is the result?
The world had grown accustomed to tensions between France and its former African colonies. But what unfolded in Ouagadougou was unlike anything seen before. The story began quietly, with whispers in diplomatic circles. French President Emmanuel Macron had been pressing for a reset in relations with Africa, an attempt to preserve what remained of France's crumbling influence on the continent. Yet, beneath the polished speeches and rehearsed smiles, Paris knew the truth. Its grip on West Africa was slipping fast. And at the center of this tectonic shift was a single figure, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. The young Burkinabe leader, who had risen from the barracks to the presidency, had done what many before him only dreamed of. He expelled French troops, closed down French military bases, and began rallying a new Pan-African movement for sovereignty. To Paris, this was more than defiance. It was a contagion. If Burkina Faso succeeded, others would follow. And so, on a humid evening in Ouagadougou, the unthinkable happened. Macron himself flew in under tight security. Officially, the visit was billed as a private diplomatic dialogue. But insiders revealed it was something else entirely, a confrontation. At the presidential compound, cameras were barred, journalists kept at a distance. Only a handful of aides, translators, and security guards were permitted inside the room where the two men would face off. The setting was stark, a long mahogany table, two flags, Burkina Faso's red, green, and gold, and France's tricolor, placed at opposite ends, almost like silent adversaries. Traoré entered first, calm and steady, wearing his signature military fatigues. Macron followed minutes later, his suit immaculate, his face carrying the polished diplomacy of Paris, but his eyes betraying unease. For a few moments, silence reigned. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner and the shuffling of papers. Then Macron spoke first. "Captain Traoré," he began, his French accent crisp. "France has always considered Burkina Faso a partner, a friend. But your recent actions, expelling our troops, cutting ties, risk isolating your country. Do you truly believe Africa can walk this path alone?" Traoré didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his voice measured but unyielding. "Monsieur Macron," he replied, "Africa has walked alone before, through slavery, through colonization, through exploitation. The difference now is that we are not walking in chains. We walk by choice. And yes, France may feel isolated, but that is not Burkina Faso's burden to bear." The aides exchanged uneasy glances. Macron pressed on, his tone sharpening. "You underestimate the cost. Security, trade, development. Do you think Russia, China, or your so-called Pan-African allies will give you more than France has given? You risk leading your people into uncertainty." A faint smile crossed Traoré's lips. "Uncertainty?" he said softly. "We have lived in certainty for decades, the certainty of exploitation. Our gold, our land, our dignity traded for aid that kept us dependent. That certainty is more dangerous than the unknown. At least in uncertainty, we have the chance to build something new." Macron's jaw tightened. He hadn't come to lose this exchange. He leaned closer, his voice low, almost a whisper but edged with steel. "You are young, Captain. Idealism burns bright in youth. But France is patient. We have seen many like you rise and many fall. Power is not eternal." Traoré's gaze hardened. "True," he said. "Power is not eternal. Not for me, not for you, not for France. That is why the only legacy worth leaving is freedom. If I fall tomorrow but my people rise, then I will not have failed." "Tell me, Monsieur Macron, can France say the same about its legacy in Africa?" The room froze. Even the translators hesitated, their voices faltering as they carried the words across the table. Macron's face flushed, but he maintained composure. "You risk provoking more than just France," he warned. "The entire international order is watching. Sanctions, isolation, instability, it will come, and your people will pay the price." Traoré straightened in his chair. "My people already paid the price, Monsieur Macron. Paid with blood in your wars, paid with sweat in your mines, paid with silence in your history books. If today we must pay again, let it be for our own freedom, not for France's comfort." For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence felt heavier than the words that had been exchanged. Then, abruptly, Macron rose to his feet, adjusting his suit jacket. "This conversation," he said, his tone icy, "is not finished." Traoré remained seated, calm, unmoved. "No, Monsieur Macron," he replied. "This conversation has just begun, and it will not be finished until Africa is free." Macron turned, signaling to his aides. The French delegation filed out, their footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. But the image remained, a young African leader standing unbowed before the President of France. By morning, whispers of the confrontation leaked. Anonymous sources described tense words and an unprecedented exchange. Social media in Africa lit up with speculation. Was Traoré challenging France directly? Had Macron threatened retaliation? No one knew for certain, but one thing was clear. The balance of power had shifted. For the first time in decades, Africa was not the one being summoned to Paris. Paris had come to Ouagadougou and had left without victory, and this was only the beginning. The night after the Ouagadougou meeting, the Burkina Faso capital pulsed with an electric tension. Street vendors replayed the rumor on battered radios. Macron walked out. Taxi drivers debated every possible meaning. In roadside cafes, elders murmured that the ghosts of Sankara and Lumumba were smiling somewhere beyond the stars. By dawn, the story had leapt borders. Le Monde's headline screamed, "A Cold War in the Sahel." Al Jazeera described it as the moment France lost Africa's heart. On social media, African youth turned Traoré into a symbol. Africa, Will Rise trended from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Memes of the young captain facing down a suited Macron flooded WhatsApp groups, often captioned simply, "The tables have turned." Paris woke to a diplomatic firestorm. The Élysée Palace issued a carefully worded statement claiming the meeting was constructive. But French talk shows told a different story. Analysts warned that if Burkina Faso could expel France's influence so openly, Mali, Niger, even Senegal might follow. "It's a domino," said one retired general on live TV. And Traoré just pushed the first tile. Behind closed doors, Macron convened his Security Council. Intelligence chiefs laid out options: economic pressure, suspension of aid, quiet support for rival factions. But each move carried risk. Burkina Faso no longer stood alone. It had forged security pacts with Mali and Niger and was warming ties with Russia, Turkey, and China. A misstep could ignite a regional backlash France could not contain. While Paris calculated, Ouagadougou moved. Traoré addressed a roaring crowd in the Place de la Révolution. Wearing his trademark fatigues and a calm smile, he spoke without notes. "Africa is not against the people of France," he began, his voice steady but carrying to the far edges of the square. "We are against domination. We seek friendship, not control. Respect, not subservience." Cheers shook the city. He raised a hand for quiet and continued. "Some will threaten us with sanctions, with isolation. But we know the truth. A continent united cannot be isolated. We have brothers and sisters from the Cape to Cairo, from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Our destiny is in our own hands." The crowd erupted, chanting, "Liberté, unité, dignité." Three words that echoed across the airwaves and deep into West Africa's political soul. That night, the speech dominated African television. Commentators compared it to the fiery addresses of Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba. Young musicians in Lagos remixed Traoré's phrases into Afrobeat anthems. Macron, thousands of kilometers away, tightened his jaw as aides briefed him. France's influence was not merely challenged. It was mocked, turned into a pop culture rallying cry. Determined to regain the narrative, Macron scheduled a high-profile address from Paris. Under the gilded ceilings of the Élysée, he spoke to the world. "France respects the sovereignty of every nation," he said, measured and diplomatic. "But we will not tolerate the spread of disinformation or the undermining of regional stability." The speech fell flat. African commentators called it polished emptiness. European journalists noted how rarely Macron used the word partnership, a sign that bridges were fraying faster than the French government would admit. Then came an unexpected twist. Anonymous documents leaked online. Trade agreements, mining contracts, and military memoranda, suggesting decades of uneven deals that favored French corporations over African economies. Investigators could not confirm the source, but many suspected sympathizers within Burkina Faso's former colonial archives. The revelation sparked outrage. In Dakar, protesters waved signs reading "Our Gold, Our Future." In Abidjan, university students held teach-ins on neo-colonial exploitation. As protests flared across Francophone Africa, Traoré stayed on message. He invited leaders from Mali and Niger to Ouagadougou for an emergency summit. Cameras captured the three presidents clasping hands beneath a banner that read, "Alliance of Sahel Sovereignty." Their joint declaration was brief but explosive, a pledge to create a shared defense force and a unified economic framework, without French oversight. Paris seethed. European diplomats lobbied the African Union to mediate. Washington urged dialogue and restraint, but the momentum had shifted. The Sahel Alliance announced plans for a new regional currency, further loosening France's economic grip. International markets wobbled. Gold prices spiked as traders wondered whether Burkina Faso might restrict exports. French mining firms saw their shares tumble on whispers of nationalization. Meanwhile, in the cafes of Ouagadougou, the talk was not of markets but of dignity. "For the first time," said a middle-aged tailor to a foreign reporter, "I feel we are the ones making history, not watching it." The psychological change was palpable. Murals of Traoré appeared overnight on city walls, not as a cult of personality, but as a symbol of collective defiance. Children played a new game in dusty courtyards. One played Macron, the other Traoré, reenacting the now legendary meeting. But Traoré knew the stakes. In private meetings with advisors, he cautioned against complacency. "France is wounded," he said. "A wounded power is unpredictable." Intelligence briefings confirmed his fears. Unmarked drones had been spotted near Burkina Faso's northern border. Foreign agents were rumored to be cultivating dissent among certain tribal leaders. Traoré ordered a quiet but firm counterintelligence sweep, determined to keep the revolution homegrown and uncorrupted. Then, on a rainy evening, an encrypted message reached his desk. An invitation from Macron for a second dialogue, this time in neutral territory, Geneva. Traoré read it twice, his face unreadable. His advisors debated through the night. Some urged him to go, to show strength on the global stage. Others warned it was a trap, a way to reassert French dominance. As dawn broke over Ouagadougou, Traoré finally spoke. "I will go," he said, "but not to beg. We go to tell the world that Africa negotiates as an equal, or not at all." And so the stage was set for a confrontation the world would watch live. A young African captain challenging the President of France before an international audience. The next chapter of this unfolding drama promised either an uneasy truce or a new era of open rivalry. For millions across Africa, hope burned brighter than fear, because for the first time in living memory, the balance of power felt as if it might truly shift, away from Paris, toward Ouagadougou, and toward a continent ready to speak for itself.